Hey First Pres, What's Up is coming to you from First Presbyterian Church in York, Pennsylvania, providing pertinent and helpful information, inspiration, and encouragement in these challenging times.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Hey First Pres, What's Up? I'm Guy Dunham, your host for today's program, and I have the honor of having two guests today. One is Reverend Aaron Anderson, CEO and head of Locust Academy. Hey, Aaron. Good to have you back.
It's great to be back.
And then Delass Johnson, who we just did two sections to that interview.
Yeah.
It's very popular, by the way. Anyway, Delass Johnson, she's the director of Youth and College Ministries here at First Presbyterian Church. Thank you so much. I am really looking forward to this. You all have a lot to say just about your own work and ministry and what you're doing, but also interaction between the two of you. As you know, I already sent you the questions, so you know where we're going to go. And I think we're going to have a great episode today. So, Aaron, what I'd like you to do first is provide a little bit of background about yourself, your family, you know, the whole spiel.
No, I won't give you the whole spiel.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife and I, Gail, have been married for 24 years. I know it's surprising because you look at me and you think, wow, he looks so young, but that's not true. I have 6 kids, right? So 6 kids who,
Let me
interestingly,
see, 6 into 24.
Yeah, do the math there. See if you can figure that out.
Yeah.
So my kids range from 8 to 21. So
Okay.
I'm sitting here in the First Pres building, and some of those kids actually went to school in this building.
It's cool.
Which is pretty cool.
We're going to talk about that.
I know.
That's cool.
And as I'm the head of Logos Academy. Been doing that for about 7 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Nice.
And Delass, a little bit about yourself.
Well,
For those who haven't already heard about you.
Yeah, we just talked about me.
Yeah, I know, but we're...
So I'm the director of the Youth and College Ministries here at First Presbyterian. I've been here for just about 2 years. In September, we'll make 2 years. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
I guess time flies when you're having fun.
Yep.
I have 3 kids, Zion, who's 16, Journey, she's 8, and Zara, who's 2. She'll be 3. This month, and so that's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we'll leave the terrible 2s behind.
They become the
Woo! I am excited. I think I'm going to throw a party for myself when she turns 3. And let's see what else. Oh, I think it's a major deal that I have a big family. I am the 11th child of 14.
Wow.
Which I feel like, you have 6 kids.
Serious. 14.
That's seriously
I feel like when you have that big family, it's just like it hits you different.
Yeah.
Like life hits you a little differently, or you see things from just like a different perspective or through a different lens as someone who grew up in a house with just where they're the only kid.
Right.
I mean, those are just my thoughts. I'm a little biased maybe because I have so many siblings, but yeah. So that's the thing with me.
And if they want to hear more about
your
your story, they can go to the other podcasts that we did. Anytime you want to find any of the podcasts, go on Facebook and just look up, Hey First Pres, What's Up? And then you scroll down and you can find it. One of the neat things about having Aaron and Delass here today, among a number of things, is a year ago when we were still in the sanctuary, as you remember doing the podcast, we had a panel not long after the murder of George Floyd. And certainly we were deeply concerned about race relations in our nation and what was going on. And that was an awesome podcast. I have sent it to some people recently and came back and said, wow, that was really awesome just listening. So thank you for coming back again. That's why I knew there'd be great chemistry between the two of you. As I'll say later, but can be said even now, you have such a heart for the city and for city youth. And So, Aaron, you've got some exciting things going on at Logos Academy. A little bit of construction going on.
Yeah, it's an understatement. It's I'm if you sense like some more relief on my face, it's because some of it is actually happening now. So last year I was just touring some folks from out of state over at Logos just literally today. We ran 4 campaigns last year at the school. Normally we have our annual fund or our annual scholarship fund, because we're that private school that exists for kids that can't afford private school. So we're typically raising about $2.5 million a year just to scholarship kids. That's one. We had a COVID campaign because, there was just substantial adjustments that we had to make to operations to actually run a school with kids in person. We had a playground campaign, which praise the Lord, that is built. We're doing ribbon cutting next week.
Really?
Which is exciting. Well, back to school night, we're going to have a ribbon cutting on this playground that that's exciting to see. The kids are going to be, I can't wait to see, they're going to be so excited.
Cool.
They'll be more excited about that than they will the building construction project.
Oh, yeah.
So we got phase 1 of a construction project. That was the 4th. That was a $4.5 million project. And that's step 1 of building out our kind of the high school campus and then just adding some gym space, things like that. That gym will happen in phase 2, but the old, people will know the old Moore Cadillac Oldsmobile dealership we acquired a few years ago. So we're renovating that, and so that's underway right now. And that's so yeah, it's exciting. That's going to give us capacity to serve more kids eventually. So we're really excited about that.
Cool.
Awesome.
There'll be folks who are watching this who will not have heard of Logos, or they will have, but don't really know much about it.
Yeah.
So here's your opportunity for your second spiel.
Yeah.
On what is Logos,
Yeah.
A little bit, where did it get started, and then your educational philosophy approach, and who are the kind of students that attend, et cetera.
Yeah, so we started, Logos Academy started by 2 Christian ladies back in 98. And actually, as I go back and look at the documents, 96 is when they actually filed their paperwork. Okay. So it's 1996. And Tracy Foster, Connie Ray, and they were looking around the country at city issues, and they were actually really moved by something that happened in Chicago, but they were living here in York, and they began looking at York and began surveying, how can we actually serve this community? The school district that we live in, and anything I say, I hope the audience doesn't hear as being criticisms of local school leaders or locals. There are a lot of great folks here, a lot of very smart people doing the work that they're doing. But the reality is we have real substantial education issues. This district this local York City school district has ranked pretty low consistently across the state for a long time. And so Logos Academy was started to serve kids as a Christ-centered classical school. And what was so unique about it was that it's a private school that really was started for kids that would never, ever be able to afford private school. Right. Our model, our financial model, it costs us about $12,000 per kid to educate those kids. But the families on average are paying, somewhere in I think last year was probably about $1,400 per kid is what families were paying. So when you just do the math on that, you're raising over $10,000 a year per kid to cover that gap. Okay. So we're a K-12 school. You already heard me say we're Christ-centered. I think I love that we are a Christ-centered school. We're not your typical Christian school because a lot of times Christian schools are we're gonna educate just church families or Christian families, and we're only going to serve them. Mm-hmm. We were started to serve all kids. We take any kid from any situation, and the goal is to partner with their families to give them really high quality education. So it ends up that probably I would venture to guess half of our families are not churched at all. Kids are not religious. And so, but they're in an atmosphere where they're loved, they're nurtured. It's a classical liberal arts school. So they're going to in middle school, they're going to take formal logic. They're going to learn Latin in middle school. They're going to, by the time they're in high school, they're going to be sitting down, reading great works of literature in Socratic dialogue. And you're going to get wildly diverse cultural perspectives around topics. So we're Christ-centered, but because we are here in this county, we are a culturally diverse school. I mean, that is our second pillar. I mean, so you're going to go in and you're going to see kids across not only socioeconomic spectrum, but also racial ethnic spectrum. It's very, very diverse student body, which is what drew me actually to come to Logos Academy as a parent years ago. Was we had moved into the city, and I said, I want my kids to grow up around diversity of all kinds. And how do I get them exposure to that? It's actually in this building. Crazy enough, we were just walking around.
I know.
This building, I remember walking up those old stairs here in this building, creaky old stairs.
And they're still creaky and old.
Walking my first grader Ellis up to Mrs. Williams' first grade class. And so my own kids have gone through. I've had 2 kids actually who've graduated from Logos. So we've now graduated 7 high school classes. We weren't always a K-12 school. We were K-8. Now we're K-12. The neat thing is like when you look at national data on schooling, there's clearly gaps, opportunity gaps. Historically, they've been racial, but what's been emerging over time is actually socioeconomic. And so the learning gaps are really widening. What's cool at Logos, what you see is like in a class, you'd see kids are across a wide range of spectrum socioeconomically, but they're performing academically almost identically, like meaning they're outperforming national averages. So last year's class, all those kids performed well. They all got into the colleges of their first choice. Half of them probably had full tuition or full ride scholarships to college. Wow. And so it's pretty transformative. And yet we're still a pretty small community. I mean, we're not a huge school. We're 225 kids. Our expansion will allow us to expand out to about 400 kids. Lord willing. So that's basically in a nutshell what.
But they do get a lot of individual attention because they're smaller classrooms.
It is. That's the key. I mean, we really try to hold at 18. Occasionally we'll allow a class to go to 20. That's really unique. And I'll just say, even from one of the emerging trends in education is paying attention to kids' trauma. And being a trauma-informed school. And so part of that is like, because we're small, we can pay really close attention to things that are going on with that kid in the classroom, things that are going on at home. Kids come in and you can tell, we know traumatized kids are either operating on fight or flight, one of those two. And so when you've got a teacher who's not so maxed out with a number of kids in their classroom that they can pay attention to that kid, and what we would say in our mission, I mean, our mission statement states that the school is grounded in the love of Christ. And so the thing I'm always trying to push, and that our faculty are doing a great job of pushing, is these kids are going to be loved and they're going to be respected. They're image bearers of God. They have dignity. They have value. They can achieve, and they can succeed. And they, all the things that, the rest of the world looks and says like, oh, here's all the reasons why those kids won't succeed. We look and say, nope, like that's not, with love and with respect and care for them and their families. We think these kids can do amazing things, and we're seeing it. I mean, I have kids who are engineers at Ford Motor Company now. Kids who are architects down in Baltimore, graduates. Cool. I mean, so that's neat to see. Even though we're a small school, you're still having some impact on kids.
I'm sorry you're not excited about your school.
All right, I got you. You did. You caught me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, did I not?
No, it is. It is so
exciting,
awesome, Aaron, to hear your excitement. And
absolutely.
I think in a sense it is a point of pride, if you will, for First Presbyterian to have been able to provide in its infancy the space for Logos to where it's gotten now.
If every First Pres member should come walk through the current Logos Academy building. There is literally, I was touring a group of people from all over the country today who are helping us fund the second phase of the project. And there's a piece of art that's up on our second floor that you can see, and it's a bunch of church steeples that an artist designed. There were 3 churches that really gave us our launching and our founding, and you'll see the First Pres steeple is there. Not only that, but you can see you can see the First Pres steeple from our second floor. And
Really?
we always, whenever I
I
tour,
didn't know that.
Yeah. So we started in Christ Lutheran. We were there for a very short amount of time.
Okay.
But then we transitioned right over here on this side of town to First Pres, and then Asbury also helped house. So we had, for a time, we were at both Asbury and First Pres. So both of my kids went to both.
Awesome.
And were it not, I mean, I really think, and I'll tell you, Guy, too, one of the things that we're constantly wrestling with is how do you keep Christians who are now, especially in this age of anger and craziness that's going on, how do you keep Christians united around a mission? We've been able to do it for like 24 years by God's grace, to have all these diverse churches and diverse Christians come together, because I think they all believe that Jesus' heart is actually saying, like, these kids matter to Jesus.
Yeah.
And we can put our differences aside and work together. And those steeples, to me, like, are our sign that say, like, this is not just about two ladies or a few Christians. This has been an ecumenical movement that where the body of Christ has come together to do something really good in York City.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just as a matter of pointing out, it was a year ago that Delass helped me host another panel that followed the one that we had with you, and two of the girls were from your school, and I believe that Tippy, Zipporah,
yeah.
I said Tippy,
yeah,
Zipporah is it Fordham University?
Yeah, they just graduated. Yep. So yeah, Zipporah and Arlette,
and then Arlette.
Yep, and they
Letty.
Yep. Yeah, and they've done and they're two graduates who are out there, kind of these are students who are out and they want to go. They've got fire and passion, and they want to go make a difference in the world.
And they were awesome. They were so well spoken, and I know the people that saw that panel were really impressed. And I think it spoke highly. It spoke highly on a couple of things, Aaron, is that the girls organized the BLM protest. And we know that was not popular in all areas.
Right.
But they did an incredible job. Delass and I were there, attended along with a number of other people from First. We were so impressed by their leadership capabilities. And I believe a lot of it had to do with their training at Logos, but also the fact that they had your support, that you stood with them, even though I'm sure you got your criticism. We don't need to go into it, but I'm sure you did. And we've had it here.
Yeah.
We've had people say, who was down there? Who from this church went, immediately got uptight. And we always need to emphasize, it was the most peaceful, diverse, well-run. Even when things got a little iffy, they grabbed control of it. And I just think it speaks to what you do there.
Yeah, they did it. Yeah, they did an amazing job. It just also does speak to, though, like some of the coalitions that have been built locally. I mean, that's one of the things I believe about York, even as frustrated as I can get about sometimes the lack of progress. There are some pretty strong coalitions that exist here. And as you know, one of them is with our local law enforcement as well. We've been building a coalition there for some time.
Which is another podcast, by the way.
That is, we can do another one. Well,
yes,
I'll be glad to do that. But we really tapped in, and they provided great leadership. They had some mentors helping them, and then there was just a good coalition. Yeah. I mean, it does speak volumes to. I mean, this city is, as most of your folks who've been around First Pres for a long time. Back in the late '60s, right, 1969, this city was like burning down, like practically. I mean, there were massive race riots here. The National Guard, tanks rolling through with dogs out in the streets. This, of any place that could have exploded nationally, like in light of Freddie Gray, back in, I think it was 2015, this could have been the place that would have done it. So it does speak volumes to not only the leadership of the kids, but then some of the coalitions that have been built here as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, that's awesome. Delass, we won't go over what you all I keep saying, go back to the other podcast. But anyway, you've been kind of growing a relationship between First Presbyterian and Logos, which is a real natural. So maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about your experience has been, how you ended up talking to a chapel there, and some other things about what's going on with Logos.
Yeah, well, we're definitely hoping to continue to grow in relationship with Logos Academy. it just so happened that for the mission trip this year, I just kept looking at it like it's incredible to be able to do missions and to travel and go places outside of our community to do mission work. But there are so many opportunities for us to do mission work right here in our community.
Right.
And it's just like there are so many kids in this community who would love to be a part of this or who may have not ever experienced mission work. And it's just like, how do we reach them? How do we get to them? And I'm like, oh, let me call Aaron. Let me reach out to Aaron and see if this is something that Logos would want to be a part of. And right, like automatically, Aaron's like, let me put you in touch with, and let me make sure that you, like right away, connected me with, I don't recall his name. Was it
Michael Hornbaker?
Michael, yeah. Yep. And he and I, like, we emailed back and forth. He's like, I think the best way for you to do this is to come in and speak to chapel. And my thoughts are, I'm like, okay, so I know from my experience, chapel there's usually a service, there's music and then there's a message. So I show up to the school and like automatically I'm greeted, I'm welcomed, even in this morning time. So the kids are coming in, the kids are walking by and they're speaking. But that was my first time actually like really spending time in Logos. I came there one time before to meet with you. But I'm looking around and I'm just like amazed by like the way the kids came in. Because from what I'm used to, when kids are coming in the morning, it's like rowdy, it's loud. There's a lot of commotion. There may be some banging up against walls, but there was none of that. It was just like it was almost like, when you're on a college campus and you're passing through to go to your different classes, there was such maturity that was, and it wasn't like they're like, oh, let's be on our best behavior because we have a guest in the building. Right. No, like the kids, like this was them. And so I sat outside of the space where they hold their chapel, and I'm reading the mission, and I'm like blown away by the mission, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm just like, God, like if there's something else you want me to say other than what I plan to say, like just give it to me. So I walk inside, and I'm a part of this chapel experience that is put on by the students. Like this, it is student led, which I felt like I found that to be amazing. It was like I felt like I was really in a worship service, and it felt good. So I'm watching them, and they were really good. And then I get up and I get this opportunity to speak, and it felt like First Pres, where you're standing up there and you're sharing this message, and you may say something that's funny, and it's funny, but no one laughs. Oh, man. So when I saw that, I was just like, oh, no, you guys aren't going to do me like this. Like, no, like, I'm talking. Can you guys engage? So, and
are we allowed to?
Oh, my goodness. Yes. Yeah. And it was almost as if, are we allowed to? But it was like right away. The feedback I got from the kids, like afterwards, it was really good. Cool. I held their attention the entire time. Now, initially I thought, I was like, oh, I could do a PowerPoint presentation and show them what the mission trip is all about. But instead, I just prepared like I would, probably for a Sunday morning message, a story and scripture, and they held on to it because afterwards, some of the kids came up and they were like, I really like that. I really like what you shared. And one of the kids being Aaron's son, Luke, and of course he walks up to me and he's like towering over me, and I'm like, who's your dad?
I feel like you figured that out.
Yeah, like right away. One, he looks like his dad, but then it's just like, I'm like, dude, okay, yeah, you're Aaron's son. I mean, I just see it. Jeez. But
and you don't realize that moving of all my kids, like the fact that he came home that day and said, hey, I think I'm going to go on that mission trip. I was like, dang, like she really got through. If she got through to Luke, like if she moved Luke, then she should feel good about that.
Oh man. And I mean, and he reached out, sent me an email. There was, and then
Yamalet.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. She responded like almost immediately. It was like, she was just like, I need to find out if I'm going to be able to get time off from work, but I know for certain I want to go. And then the two of them, like their relationship was amazing, just to see how it's like they had a vibe that was, you could tell that it was genuine, and it was already set before the trip.
Yeah.
But it just seemed like while we were on this mission trip, the kids had, like, they knew one another. Like it was like they all knew. There was never a moment where it was just like awkward.
Yeah.
It was like this big family trip that we'd taken.
And we're gonna put together a panel with them.
Oh yeah, I think it's necessary. Oh my gosh, because there were some funny stories, but then there were also some just really, I just feel like great moments.
Awesome.
I shared on the previous podcast how it was a time when we were at one of the mission sites, and Luke had an opportunity to speak with a group of Mormons, and Yamilet is just like, she's talking to him too, but then she's just like, she's gun-held. She has her opinion, her thoughts, and this is what, and Luke is like, look, you got to open up. You got to, expand your horizons. And Yamilet is like, no, I don't. And so it just sparked this conversation between the two of them. And I just walked in on it, and it was just like, Luke's like, Delass, talk some sense into her. And it was, but the conversation, the dialogue was intense. It was great.
Good.
But the one thing that I noticed that, like, after every like really engaging conversation, Luke would like text his dad or something. He's just like, yeah, my dad said this. And I'm like, wow. For his dad to have that kind of impact, that he's like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but let me make sure. Let me back this up.
I remember him blowing my phone up. He's like, asking me all these questions about Mormonism. Like, what is going on? Like, what is Delass? Like, what has Delass taken my son into? Like is she converted? No, I'm
Oh, man.
I do remember that, though. I remember them getting there. And that's actually, that kind of, that intensity of dialogue is something that if you were to go to like a high school Socratic dialogue discussion, you'd see those kids. They're actually often, they have to lead the discussion. So they'll read something, they'll bring a set of questions in, and then you just, like, we often will invite community members in to watch and to participate, and they will just they'll go at it, and then they go to lunch together.
Yeah.
And so, but they're learning how. It doesn't mean that it doesn't get intense. It doesn't even mean that, like, sometimes we have to deal with stuff after the fact and kind of deconstruct something, because they're usually dealing with pretty intense, heavy topics that adults can't do now. But we're trying to still, like, we want to teach these kids how to dialogue. Our world needs more people who can do
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Creating a real model for how it needs to be done. A little child shall lead them.
Yeah.
Right. Ideal. I mean, it is. I think that's one of the things we're seeing culturally right now is, how much anger and hostility, and then just like the refusal to even listen or to consider an opinion. I'm glad to hear he's actually saying, like, well, convince me, here's what I believe. But so, and that's all part of that learning process.
Right.
Yeah. And it sharpens you.
Yeah.
When you have to be talking with someone who obviously has opinions that are vastly different than your own, and a worldview that's vastly different, and then when talking about your own faith is different, but it makes you have to look at yourself, which should be part of the educational process in Christian education. Is not just simply knowing it all, but knowing why you believe what you believe.
Yeah, and then that ability to listen to somebody and say, like, I disagree with you, but I still respect you, and I'm still treat you as human, and
That's
I'm
right.
as a fellow human, image bearer, and I'll hear what you have to say, because I always try to teach my kids, like, the truth. Jesus says the truth sets us free, so we don't need to fear the truth, right? So we should be seekers of the truth.
No.
Right.
I think there's this fear, though, that people think that if I listen to a different opinion, I'll change mine. No, not necessarily. Now, you may stretch, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to change. And I think it's an underlying fear that if I listen too much, it creates doubts in myself or what I believe. And I think when you allow people to deal with those, it's okay to doubt for a little bit. Now, let's go find out why.
Right.
What do you need to do to bolster it, if that be the case?
Right.
So What do you see the growing relationship then between First Presbyterian and Logos? And you have anything you know of or thinking about right now? What you'll be doing?
So I know that when we were preparing to leave for the mission trip,
Mm-hmm.
I had an opportunity just for a little while to talk with, some of the parents. And I was talking with Aaron, and he's like, if this is something that you're serious about and, you guys are going to be doing, this is something we can look at a little bit. I mean, like look into it even further
It's a partnership.
as a part. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. This mission trip and getting together, not just, a handful of students, but getting together hundreds of students that could come together and do this mission trip. And whereas, it's sponsored. So that some of those kids who normally wouldn't have that opportunity to attend a mission trip because, for financial reasons or what may have you, now they have this opportunity to attend a mission trip and participate and really get to understand, what missionary work is all about. One of the things I shared with them when I went to Logos and spoke is when I was in high school and I went on my first mission trip, we had to fundraise, and raising funds, I don't really want to raise funds to go on this mission trip. Why do I have to raise funds to go on this trip again? And I could just remember saying, like, okay, God, like if it's really meant for me to go on this trip, like you'll make the provisions. And like not long after that, like I got a phone call. My entire trip was paid for. Yeah. And it's kind of like, okay, all right. So I guess I must go on this trip. But I think it was it was probably the best experience I had. And I'd done, quite a bit of traveling through sports. So for track or for basketball, I did a lot of traveling, but I had never gone on a mission trip to where I'm actually going to like another country to serve. And it's just it's an incredibly humbling experience. Even the local trips when you're serving and providing missionary work in your own community, because I just feel like it allows you to look at life through a different lens or look at things from a different perspective. It's like, no, I'm not the richest and I don't have everything. But when you're serving someone who is in a greater need than what you may be in, it's just like, it's eye-opening, and it has the opportunity to be life-altering.
It really puts it all in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think one of the ways, we certainly talked about that. I think the idea of, this is a good starting point, is get a couple students involved and then see if, by way of a missions trip, if that's not something that students could go do. Because one of the areas that we're really going to be trying to grow is how do we build out community service as a real value. We talk about it a lot at school, but we don't have a great mechanism in place for doing community service. So that is something we want to do. We want to see our kids leading projects. Now, Guy, you were here, so it may have been before Delass was here, but maybe it was 3 years or so ago. I preached here at First Pres, and it was like,
it was awesome.
13 practical things you could do to be reaching. So one of those, one of the things that I think about, church partners are really critical for us, and we want to simultaneously get our kids connected. But imagine being able to take classes or classes of kids and bring them in and say, like, how do we come alongside a local church, First Pres, who's in our community? We have kids that probably live in the neighborhoods, in this Northeast neighborhood that I know we do. How could we do very local mission in ways that we could actually support your church and simultaneously give our kids opportunities to serve and do some practical things? We do We do a staff day apart, one day where all of our staff we send out to local nonprofits. So, every year we've done the Northeast neighborhood, like the closet back there where there's, we've done that
with Darlene.
Yeah, but we haven't done that with our students. And one of the things we want to do is our kids are receiving an education, but we really want to make them servants of this community. And so I think that's probably one of the things that we could be talking about with local churches is how could we be partnering together? Because even thinking about your members and our kids serving alongside of each other, doing some of the stuff that we do, like for instance, as a staff, there's probably a lot of projects that I just think that intergenerational
That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
would be amazing.
Yeah.
And the kids would love it. I tell the kids would love it. And I know the adults would love it as well. And it'd be extending the mission of, like we're not a church. We recognize that we're a school. But we rely on church partnerships substantially.
And
Yeah,
that would real fit in because a couple of years ago, First Presbyterian did a visioning process seeking what is God calling us now in the 21st century to be and to do sitting here for 260 some years.
Right.
And one of them, the overall theme was following Jesus everywhere. And it had 5 parts and was following Jesus into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we have people who are just biting at the bit, Aaron, to be finding ways to get into the neighborhood and interacting. And I think that would be an awesome way to do that.
Yeah, and I think there probably are really practical ways of being the hands and feet to Jesus,
Yeah.
to these neighborhoods around here where people need home helps. They need, they need, who you all know because you have a caring ministry that does that. I guarantee they could give you a list of here's 10 things we could do tomorrow.
Yeah. So, for example, like when we were on the mission trip, one of the things that we did, we visited a gentleman who had just had knee surgery, and his wife had double knee replacement. And they were seniors, and they had acres of bamboo. I'm not sure if Luke talked to you about it, but the bamboo was
the bamboo.
The bamboo was, the bamboo was the one that had the kids like, do we really have to go back there? But we just went and we helped him to chop down that bamboo and cut back some so he could, just have a starting point. And I'm sure that, that was just someone in the community. We have that here in the community, someone who, maybe their front porch is like falling in or, and I'm riding down Philadelphia Street, like you see that. I know that I've kind of just been stalking the local churches in the community, like just showing up for their services and, hi, I'm Delass. And
I heard you were doing that. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, it's been
so
fun.
awesome.
It's been really fun. And so when I'm out and I'm walking, and when kids recognize me, like I think like I feel like that's how it gets started.
Yeah.
And then they're like, hey, that's that lady from that church over there, and then that's how we began to build.
That church?
Yeah, that church. That big church over there.
That church, so you can see the steeple across town.
Yeah, so when then I'm like, I tell them the name of the church, but they're like, yeah, it's still that church. Oh, the church that's across from the library.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
That place.
Yeah.
Well, imagine, I'm not even aware of a model like I'm describing of having existing current church members, that church, and then local kids like working together. Because what I, as an educator, I think what this would do for our kids is also transform the way they view their neighborhoods.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You see Mrs. So-and-so over there, like, oh yeah, I remember we went over there. We helped get groceries for her, help fix her porch.
Yeah.
Begins to transform them into thinking like that is what the classical liberal arts are all about, is about virtue and character formation.
Yeah.
What the best way, Jesus didn't like sit his disciples down and teach them a class about service. They walked with him,
right.
and they saw and they participated.
Relationship for relationships.
Relational ministry.
Yeah, relational.
Yeah,
ministry.
another thing that we talked about, and it was probably right before the pandemic, but with the and I know you haven't gotten to it yet, Guy, but the police and clergy meeting.
We're going to do that.
Right.
That'll be another one.
But we talked about a way to get the students involved.
Yep.
And
really? Cool.
That like expanding that conversation, that dialogue to the student body, the young people that we were actually discussing in this meeting.
Okay. Yeah.
Bringing them in on it, getting their feedback and their thoughts on
They're
how
not
to
used
make
to anybody asking them
relationship
what
work.
they
Absolutely.
think.
No, it's just people, adults just making the decisions and feeling like, this is what's best for them.
Yeah.
But it's the young people that are impacted the most. And so they're the ones who should have the, the wavering opinion. And
So let me ask you, because this is a great segue into this, is what do you see as some of the most common misunderstandings or misperceptions people have of in regard to urban youth, who the kids are?
you have stigmatisms on, just based upon the way someone looks.
Yeah.
On their, their socioeconomic classes and education or the lack thereof. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the inner city kids goes back to what Aaron just said. The York City kids and education-wise, they're not getting what some of the kids in York County and the suburban area schools are getting. One of the things that I was told when I moved here was to make sure that I moved to York County because I have kids. So you want to make sure you're in York County.
Yeah.
So school-wise, we're looking for schools that are in York County as opposed to York City. Why? Because York City's school system isn't giving the best education.
But the misconception is, and you're proving it at Logos, is that a lot of these kids, given the opportunity, are extremely bright, very perceptive, mm-hmm. willing to learn and be, to educate themselves. If you give them the proper environment and ability to do it, and to also enforce for them their own self-image that you are a person of value.
Yeah, and I think that's a key. One of the things I see is, the first steps toward like actually being sensitized and having empathetic towards kids who are from low socioeconomic backgrounds. The first step is usually developing some kind of empathy. But if you don't go very far, it turns into pity.
Yeah.
And then what happens is people who pity end up lower standards. It's almost like, oh, those poor kids, they'll never be able to succeed. So instead of saying like, whoa, no, hold on, let's work on your theology first of all, right? These kids are made in the image of God, right. And they have dignity and they have potential. Yeah. And I love listen to my little kindergartner sing that song about potential, about I'm a possibility. You heard that song? Like,
yes.
I would sing it for you, but it just wouldn't sound as cute. But I am a possibility. I'm like, these kids can actually, they can do amazing things. Yeah. But we can't stop. You can't, pity is not the right response. It's compassion, right? Compassion is that word that means to walk with and have I'm going to walk with you in and have passion with you. And I think that's where I end up seeing there be a bit of a gap is these are people we have to throw resources at. And then you get all the arguments about, oh, we're spending all this money and it's going nowhere. It's like, no, I mean, to your point, Guy, these are kids that can do amazing things.
Yeah.
And I believe that holistically about whatever it is that God's calling you to do. Our Logos Academy declaration says, whatever God's calling me to be, He's building my character now, and I can do all things through Christ. That's what we're pushing these kids towards. So, and it's not just like these are just that's what I want to say too. Like, these are not just Logos Academy kids are not just like a special lot in the city. I believe that I think the city has 6,000 kids in the school system.
Okay.
Overall.
Wow.
I look at every one of those kids and say, we are wasting, pardon the expression, freaking human capital.
Yep.
By not investing everything we can in these kids, because every one of these kids could be doing amazing things. Instead, we come up with, we have simplistic, we stop at simplistic understandings, and then we just throw our hands up and say, oh, it's just so hard, and the problems are so complex socially to overcome. And I just think this is when I start getting irritated with York is this is a small town, and we could change these kids' lives and change generations for years to come.
Well, one of the powerful things, I know I keep on harking on this, was my sister's testimony in her podcast. She came out of the hood, where what it's like, where people just look and say, well, they're not going to go anywhere.
Right.
And there was somebody who came into your life and told her you're somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, I had my, of course, my parents, but that's in the house. And so when I would go outside, it's just, everyone around me was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But to have that mentor And for me, it was, my coaches. It was my basketball coach who introduced me to my track coaches.
Right.
And, and I had a track coach who literally, she walked with me like into college campuses. Like, nope, you're going to college. Nope, you're doing this. Nope, because you can.
And she called you to your highest potential.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And she consistently poured into me. And I feel like sometimes it's, it's one person that plants that seed, and that person may not so for example, like my basketball coach who planted the seed, he didn't see all the great things that, I was able to do, but he know that he planted that seed.
Right.
There was a different coach who watered that seed and nurtured. And so it's just like, I feel like as adults, that's our role, that's our job to do, in whatever capacity we, however we may be able to impact a kid or impact, that next generation. It's just like, whatever it is that God has blessed you to be able to do it to your fullest potential, because your impact for that child's life you may not see it right now, but it may come into play, 10, 20 years down the line. And they're like, well, this person, they said this or they did this or they wouldn't give up on me.
Right.
I know that for a lot of the kids, we did National Night Out with the Northeast neighborhood, and we did face painting. Now, I told the kids when they came up, I'm giving you a disclaimer. I just wanted to be here and be a part of this. I'm not a face painter, but I'm going to do my best. So I'm like, if you're going to fall victim, come on, get in my line. And the event started at 5 p.m. and it was from 5 to 8. And from the time that we showed up until the time that we left, there was never I never had a moment where I was not painting a kid's face. And I had Katie and who's always there to help, and Chloe, her daughter. And Chloe's like, Delass, I don't know if I can face paint. I'm like, do your best, because that's all they need to see. And the kids left with so much excitement. They were bringing friends back. The oldest kid is 13. I'm like, what are you here for?
That's evangelism.
She's like, I want a face painting too. I'm like, you're 13. You want a face painting? She's like, yeah. I'm like, come on, get over here. And I just feel like, and while they're there, I'm talking to, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so pretty. Look at you. Turn to the side. And I'm like, does that tickle? Oh my goodness. And so just talking to them. And for some of the kids, that may have really made their day.
That's right. The nicest thing they heard all day.
Well, yeah. And, I remember when I was at Lehigh back in 2017, I went back and got my master's in urban education. And looking at some data that they put out on a local school with a number of kids that were in low socioeconomic status, the data said that the students when they surveyed them did not believe that the teachers believed in their ability to succeed. The students surveyed that. When they surveyed the teachers, it mirrored it. The teachers did not believe the kids could succeed.
Wow. So the kids saw it.
The kids saw it, and they were. It was almost like self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the amazing thing is, right, and that actually goes back into some real neuroscience data on trauma research. Like even kids that are highly traumatized, all the scientific data says it takes one loving relationship to change the trajectory of a kid's life. But it's one person who will walk with that kid and who will be there and say no, you're gonna do this. You can do it. I know you can, and will support them and walk with them. And that is, anyone you talk to who made it out of a difficult circumstance will tell you there was just that one person who believed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're an example.
I'm just grateful.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to see it, whether it's the students that are going on to college from Logos, whether it's someone like yourself who's been there and done that. And of course, kids will know if you've been there and done that.
Kids read
they'll be able to see through it.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, probably a lot of us here at First Presbyterian, we're hesitant to go out there because we know we've lived a privileged life. We've not had to fight against a poor self-image or teachers who didn't believe in us. They may not have anyway, but we had parents or whatever, the structures that did that. So I think that people are a little hesitant, well, I've never been there. how am I going to do this? What do you say to somebody who's hesitant to go out there? They want to. Their heart says, I need to do. They're listening to you right now, both of you, and saying, I really want to do that, but look at me. I'm a really comfortable suburbanite. What do I have to offer?
Well, you know what I would say, guys, I guarantee every one of those people, and that includes all of us, can look at, we have key. Maybe it wasn't 10 key people, but everyone who's been successful had 1, 2, 3, or 4 maybe key people in their lives. And so imagine, and even here in the congregation of this size, there probably were people who only had one, who had one person who just made a difference. And you go back and you take that one relationship out of that person's life, and it's sort of like, there but for the grace of God go I, right? For me, you pull away my mom and dad and what they did for me, and there's no telling where I would be. I don't know. I can't even write that story because that's not my story. But you pull that out, or for people who had a youth pastor or a coach or something like that just was that one person, I would just say, like, I think the body of Christ underestimates the value of what they have to offer, because it's not just when we go out, we don't go out just in and of ourselves. I mean, that's Galatians 2:20, right? I am crucified with Christ, and Christ is living in me, and he's breathing in me. And I think if you see yourself as a vessel of Jesus Christ, which is what the body of Christ is, then it's literally, do you believe that Jesus Christ could walk into that neighborhood and make a difference? Most of us who are Christians would say, like, yeah, I believe he could probably do some pretty awesome things. Like, well, you're united to Jesus. Like, what do you think when you walk into the neighborhood? Who's walking with you? Yeah, I think that's a transformative perspective that says, like, okay, my experience is important, my skills are important, but it's really who I'm united to as a follower of Jesus that makes the difference.
Cool.
Yeah, you're not going in on your own account.
No.
Right.
No. And that's a faith-building thing too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe a little scary stepping out, but
humble yourself.
That's what it means to be walking in faith.
You're not going in on your own account.
No, you're not. Cool. We've covered some of this. What do you think are some of the best attributes then you see urban youth bringing? Well, just about, even because of the life that they may be living or where they are. How do some of those attributes actually are an advantage to them? Do you see any?
Oh yeah. I love, there's a layers of authenticity. I've lived in the city now for going on 16 years.
Okay.
There are layers of authenticity that I see not only from kids with their families. So I've lived in the suburbs, in kind of the middle class suburbs, and I've lived in the city. And what I see in the suburbs, and this is no attack on the suburbs, but I see a facade. Like, we're just better when we live in the suburbs at covering up your yard is manicured and your house has been power washed and right. And you come in and out of your garage and your car, and by and large you're put together, and you don't realize that behind the doors there could be domestic abuse, there could be sex abuse, there could be all kinds, depression, like people on the verge of suicide, addictions, all that stuff. Like, it's just, but what I find in the city is, like, people kind of wear their stuff out there.
Yeah,
they're there, and there are layers of authenticity. Like, you can get right into getting to know someone really quickly. So
that could probably be scary to a suburbanite.
It is.
Who may want to help here, but that authenticity could be really scary, could it not?
Yeah.
I'm not discouraging them. I'm just saying, facing the fact.
Absolutely. I can say I definitely want to second what you're saying, because I know that when I came in, it was just like, well, Delass, we know that you're used to working with kids from Baltimore who've had some real experiences. And I know you're used to, like, really talking about, well, our kids don't have that. And it's just like, no, everyone everywhere has issues. Stuff, yeah. And it's just like that facade that, we don't talk about that, or we don't discuss that, or that, that doesn't happen in our household, but it actually does.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some pretty ugly stuff, if we're honest. And you go back to, like, Jesus said, I didn't come to seek those that didn't need a doctor, right? I came to heal those who are sick. So that's kind of a requirement for all of us. If we're actually going to come to Jesus, we got it. Aaron Anderson and his house has to come and say, like, well, we've got some stuff there's some dysfunction that's there, and like I don't need Jesus is not a Band-Aid for us. He's a savior, right? There's a little bit of a difference. So I think that's a starting place. And yeah, I mean, it could be scary, but what I find, I mean, I just remember back when we ran a basketball program in the city years ago, when I was pastoring over at City Church, it was at the Y, and we would have about 50 kids show up every Saturday night. And the only reason we did it was we wanted kids off the street because we didn't want kids dying in the summer when we knew violence was going to be bad.
Yeah.
So me and a few other guys got together, and so we ran a basketball program. Like I said, 50 kids would show up, and I would have people would say to me, they'd say things, especially people who don't live in the city, like, oh, that must have been scary, or oh, that must have been like all this. And I would say, no, like, here's what would happen. Like we'd gather, we'd get in the center of and we'd have 50 kids come together. We'd call them together and say, hey guys, everybody get together. Say, here's the deal. Here's the rules. We're going to play basketball. We're going to have fun. Adults are going to play with you. No language, no swearing, no fighting. You leave the building. You don't come back because we didn't want weapons coming back in. So you leave, you're gone for good, and then you don't come back in. And that's it. And the kids would be like, okay. And then say, all right, let's pray. And they would bow their heads. We'd pray over them, pray protection over them. And then you get like the most rousing amen. And that would surprise people. You get like a legit church amen out of 50 kids that live in this. And you're like, dang, okay, well, these kids aren't as hostile to religion as we might think they are. I mean, they're pretty. And then we would play ball. I mean, literally one fight we had to break up. One fight. So there's a lot of assumptions I think we make about, but they're kids, right? They're kids. They've had different circumstances, but they're just kids.
They're not necessarily against faith. They're against inauthentic faith.
Yeah.
A fake faith. Like we were saying, where people use their faith to just simply be one more layer of their lack of transparency by which to hide behind.
Yeah, especially if you're watching your parents Sunday in church, and they're like this perfect couple, and things are just so awesome, and then you get home and you're like, dad is like leaning on mom, or I mean, there's really some dysfunction at home, and then but it's just like for a kid that's confusing. It's just like, I don't want to go to that place where mom and dad pretend.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's been a lot of the conversation that I've had with kids. It's like, church it's not real. The people at church are not real. I know one of the things that Letty and Zippy said when they came, and I hold on to it, but they were super surprised that we came as a church and supported them. They're like, we're not used to that. Mm-hmm. Because usually the church is just like judgmental.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of the younger generation, that's what they feel. So this basketball, I mean, I think that's phenomenal.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think missionally, I find that the kids are not really like hostile to faith. They're really not. They're not even not the idea of Jesus. I don't think that. I do think there's probably some opposition to Christians, and part of that is we're dealing with now. Like, it's very hard to operate in a local context without people knowing what's happening nationally, because we've got like gobs of news kind of coming at us. So you see the dysfunction of Christianity is kind of splashed in your face all the time in the news, whether or not this church is dysfunctional or not. It's actually very analogous to the police conversation we're having. Is like, our local police departments are doing tons of good work in terms of like bridging the gap, and yet every time a bad national incident happens, it comes back, and it's like it just sort of gets absorbed back here. And so that's just one of the things you have to keep fighting. But I do think like there are really practical ways to be reaching and serving kids right now, in ways that are going to them and not expecting people are not, in this day and age, I don't care how cool you think your church is, whether you're a traditional church or a contemporary church. Like, kids are not just going to like show up and be like riding along on their bike, be like, oh, I want to go to church. Like, that's the most, we're going to have to go out and engage them and connect with them. Yeah, relationally connect.
If we're honest, the most recent polls that were done regarding religion in America, all of us are down.
Right.
Mm-hmm. The church as a whole is down. And the largest group of those who consider themselves non-religious or nuns are in their 20s and their 30s. And many will point, and they'll point to the church and say, that's the reason. I've seen what's going on. And like you said, I don't want anything to do with it. But on a note of hope is that whole relational thing, where Zippy and Letty said to, I didn't expect this. Well, that was a relational aspect. And that's the way we bridge that gap. And the bad press that we might be getting is that they look and they say, yeah, but you're not the same. So you play basketball with a bunch of kids. Now you lay down the rules, but they're okay with that. But they knew you cared about them.
Yeah.
I cared enough to come and play basketball with them. And you didn't say, oh, you're scary. I don't want to go near you.
Right.
So it's tough work, but it means getting down in the trenches with people, building relationships, and it takes time.
That's what Jesus was all about. Jesus got in the trenches.
Well, he did. He did. And he got kind of roughed up too.
He did. Yeah, he did get crucified. Yeah, let's not forget that. No, but and Jesus says, "Carry your cross," right?
That's right.
Yeah. But I do think the ways that we could be engaging individual families and students, if the church would adopt, and I'm a Presbyterian pastor, so yes, I know. So I mean, if the church would adopt let's not just expect, how do we make our services, our Sunday services, so engaging and so cool, or whatever it is that we got to get people like that kind of Field of Dreams. We're going to build it and they will come. We've got to abandon that kind of thinking. Yeah. I'm all for worship services, and I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to participate myself, but we got to think about what are the ways that we could actually be going and connecting in these neighborhoods with, you look at, we could talk a whole other podcast about the truancy rate last year in York City schools and in the surrounding areas. Truancy rate was bad. Kids probably lost a year of education last year. So what's going to happen? They didn't hold all those kids back. So, but there are families who probably need tutoring support, things like that. Man, I just look at all those areas and say, man, the church could be doing all kinds of stuff. You got all kinds of members who could be just sitting and reading with kids, helping them with math, things like that. Those are really simple ways that could make a difference. And then they might end up being that one person that says oh, you're really bright. You could be doing better.
A number of years ago, there was a program here between First Presbyterian and Good Elementary where people tutored kids, worked with them on their homework and that sort of thing. And then like everything else, it has its cycle.
Yep.
And those people just sort of disappeared, or they got old and they couldn't do it, whatever the reason. But I've heard it brought up again, which is interesting that you say that.
Pastor Colin and I have been talking about. I know that that was something that came up when I first came, because in Baltimore I ran an after-school program for several years, and it started at Northwestern High School, which is right in the middle of the Park Heights community. It's actually closed down now, but it started at Northwestern High School, and I went to a few other high schools. But because what I realized, there were kids who were graduating from high school and could not do basic multiplication, could not write a complete sentence, and they were graduating from high school. So it started, we did tutoring, we ran tutoring programs, we did creative arts to address some of the mental health, so some of that trauma. And then it went from Northwestern High School to Liberty Recreation Center. That way we could deal with some of the kids, just West Baltimore high schools and middle schools, throughout West Baltimore. And we were connected with Liberty Elementary School too. So then we had some elementary school kids who were able to benefit from it. But that is talk that Pastor Colin and I have had, ways to be able to really serve the community. That right there speaks within itself, just the need for, especially after this year, where kids have kind of just fallen off from, accepting those kids who already just were on this mission that, I just got to make sure my grades are good. I'm keeping up with, my classes. But for those kids who were already struggling with keeping up with their classes, and then you have this whole year of online learning, or the lack thereof, they're even further behind.
Yeah.
So just to be able to present some sort of opportunity, but it's definitely something that we're looking into even for next summer.
What's kind of cool, I can't say a lot about it because it's just in the conversation right now. We're renewing our conversation with Westminster Presbyterian Church down here. As you know, they're a struggling congregation. They're a sister congregation, but they still want to serve the church in some way. And so we are looking for ways to partner with them. But they have facilities there that
Really?
aren't being used. Yes. I'm in conversation with Marcia, possibility there, but even things we're talking about here, they have room in there. And it's not a huge building, but it's a good size building. So there's always opportunities there, which is the last thing I want to talk about is what do you see as the most promising opportunities that might be going on, not only between First and Logos, but also just in New York City itself as we look for partnerships?
Well, I think exploring the relationship between Logos and First Pres and seeing like where we could go.
Okay.
I think we could have all kinds of exciting conversations, and seeing that we have a long historic relationship just makes it easy. It makes it's easy for us, I can say, institutionally to want to do. I think locally the opportunities, that I was in church yesterday and a verse kind of hit me. You can say the Spirit sort of put it in my spirit. Like this last.
It's funny how it works.
Yeah, no, isn't that yeah. The last 18 months have just been weird and hard for so many of us, and in some ways dark. And it feels to me like, there's times where I felt like, man, when are we going to, even though I'm not like get back to like the old rhythms, and something just hit me. Jesus says you don't put new wine into old wineskins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it almost like was feeling like God saying, it's time to do something new. Like there's something new, and I've been feeling like it's time for new rhythms. It's not, let's not think about going back. Like we're not going to put that new wine that's going to expand as it ferments into these old, because it'll burst, right? So let's do something new. I think the opportunity for the church that I see that's really emerging, if you look at just the human relation data, people are more lonely. They have less friends. Suicide numbers are up substantially.
Right.
Opioid overdoses were up 29% last year. Wow. What the church has, like, are human beings and human capital, and so I just think there's opportunity for us to lead the way in using that relational capital to just help people. Just give people opportunity. That's one of the kind of the new wine things. I have a friend who started on Friday mornings. He said, me and my wife are going to go down to Prince Street Cafe. We're going to be there. Whoever wants to join us, just join. And it's amazing, like the number of people who are just like showing up.
Really?
Yeah. And I think if we do some things like that, and I know people who are showing up, I've got to believe some of those people are just lonely.
Yeah.
They're just lonely. Imagine, I have 8 people in my household. I can tell you I wasn't lonely during COVID, right?
You would have liked a little loneliness.
Yeah,
huh?
but but imagine the person who's single, or like older couple who's had to stay away. People. So I just think I think I look at that and say, I think it's a real opportunity for the church now to think about, like, how do we be the body of Christ in real relational ways with each other.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
I definitely, I second what Aaron is saying. I talked about it on my podcast, but that relational ministry.
Yeah.
I had a conversation just today, and it's just like, well, I know that we're not completely out of COVID, but we need to start looking at ways to rebuild the youth ministry. And immediately my response was, without even thinking about it, we're not rebuilding the youth ministry. So, and go into what you just said, we're not, like, the way things were is not how things are going to be. Like,
that's heresy.
I just feel like God hasn't called me here for this, but it's about going beyond these walls, and that opportunity for relational ministry in our community.
Yeah.
So, rebuilding the youth ministry it's not gonna look the way it looked,
No.
you know, a year ago or 2 years ago.
No.
It's gonna look, it has to look completely different.
Yeah.
We've gone through quite a bit, you know, over the last 18 months. Like we've, as a community, as a church community. And so now, I mean, we have this opportunity to serve within our community, and we have the resources to serve, you know, our community. And so it has to look different.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So we could keep on going on and on, but I'm
then
trying
nobody will watch it.
I am really
Nobody
trying.
can watch a 2 hour
I'm like,
podcast.
oh, they're too long.
They're like, I can watch a movie in that time.
Well, poor KG has to keep on finding ways. How do I break this into 2?
Yeah. That's a good
I
editor.
try not to do that. But anyway, I knew that when I put the two of you together, it would be awesome, a great conversation. And just once again, I want to thank you so much for your heart, your servant heart, first and all, for Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Yeah.
And for his church, but also for the community in which we live and those who are most vulnerable in our midst, particularly kids, the kids, and they're the future. So thank you so much. And for all of you who have been watching, thank you for watching it. We hope that this has been a meaningful episode for you. And until we see you again, wishing you the grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ.
When he washed, when Jesus washed, he washed my sins away.